Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of the Real Talk with Rick podcast regarding all things Eden Prairie. So this episode, I have a very, very special guest. I have the person who preceded me in my position here as city manager in Eden Prairie, who is also the current city manager of Edina, and his name is Scott Neal. And he is going to come on the this podcast, and he is going to talk about his journey as a city manager in multiple communities in multiple states, and his time now in Edina. It's interesting. He'll talk about what led to a career in city management. I think Scott's a little bit unique, certainly different from me and others. When we're asked about our job as city managers, many of us will say that we didn't even know what a city manager was through high school and college, and in some cases, even as we get our graduate degrees in our field, we don't necessarily know about the details of our position. But he had an epiphany, apparently, early on about what he wanted to do, and you're going to hear about that in his journey from a small town in Tennessee to a small town in Iowa to a bigger town in Minnesota, and then to Eden Prairie in Edina. So here is my conversation with Edina and former Eden Prairie City Manager Scott Neal. Scott Neal, City Manager, thank you for coming in.
Oh, is this where I say thank you for having me?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But if you don't really feel that way, just speak your mind.
I'm super grateful, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because I think you weren't forced to do this. This wasn't like a bet that you lost.
No, I'm getting paid to do it, right?
You're getting paid.
Somebody was going to pay me to do this.
Yeah, you're going to get paid. You got a nice bottle of water right there.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah. No, thank you. You're actually coming back to a place where you worked for a period of time.
I am.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about this conversation is I get to talk to somebody who's in the same career field that I am, the same exact job. Not just, a lot of the podcasts are about Eden Prairie, and obviously you spent a lot of time here, but you did what I do a while back.
Yeah. Have you interviewed other city managers on the podcast?
No, you're the first one.
Whoa.
You're the first one.
Wow.
Thanks. Yeah. It depends on how this goes if you'll be the only one, but you're the first one.
Can you guarantee this podcast is gonna see the light of day? We'll have some people listen to it, right?
We will have some people listen to it.
I'll listen to it.
Absolutely. You'll listen to it. Yeah. Your family will listen to it. I don't know if I'll listen to it, but we'll find out.
Good.
But thank you. And so, city manager, I'd like to kind of go through your career and how you came to be where you are now, and there were some stops along the way that led to Eden Prairie, and now Edina. I mentioned in the introduction, you're the Edina city manager. So I get this question a lot. Did you always want to become and know that you wanted to become a city manager, and how did that play out?
For me, the answer is kinda. I grew up in Independence, Iowa, where America's fame is in our name. That was a tagline of our town.
All right.
Good one, eh?
Yeah, I like that.
And I went to Iowa State University for my bachelor's degree, and I went there initially as a pre-law student. I was going to be a lawyer and then be successful and then run for the U.S. Senate and then who knows what, right?
Yeah.
But when I got there...
Real quick, though, U.S. Senate... famous, is that Harkin?
Tom Harkin was a senator then, yeah. Charles Grassley.
Yeah, there were some pretty big name U.S. senators in Iowa.
So I was going to have to displace one of them.
Okay.
And so I was thinking ahead.
Yeah,
right?
Good.
But so I go to Iowa State, and I'm in my kind of first semester there. Everything goes great. Second semester, I signed up for some poli-sci class, but it was 8 in the morning. They moved it to an 8. I couldn't go to an 8 in the morning class like that. So I talked to a roommate or a guy down the hall who was also a poli-sci major, he said, you know a really good class? I can't remember the name of it, but it meets at 10 o'clock in the morning, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I thought, that sounds great. Yeah. It would end up being Poli-Sci 310, taught by Dr. Ardith Maney, and it was urban politics. And so I went, and our first assignment was to read a book about how L.P. Cookingham, very famous city manager, one of the early city managers in Kansas City, and how he tamed the corruption and everything that was going on in Kansas City at that time. And that was the first time I'd ever been acquainted with the term city manager, and I didn't understand. But the more I read about it, the more I thought, man, that's what I want to do. I don't want to go through the nonsense of an election, and be subjected to the whim of voters and so forth. But I want to be involved in politics. But I also want to be an executive too. And here was a job and get paid, right?
Yeah, right.
And here was a job where all of that came together. And I had this epiphany at that time. I was probably, I think, 19 at the time. That, man, this is what I want to do. So I changed my major to economics because, strangely enough, I changed it to economics because I didn't want to take a foreign language. Yeah, I had never had a foreign language at that point, and I thought, man, I don't want to.
Never had a foreign language in high school?
No. I have 3 boys that are all fluent in another language, but I, myself, am not.
Okay.
I didn't want to mess with it. I never had it in high school. I didn't want to do it. My choice was, do I take a foreign language as a poli-sci major, or if I changed economics, I could take calc. And it was a tough decision, but I went the calc route, and I got a C- or a D+ or something, but enough.
Absolutely.
I got a degree.
Yeah.
And they can't take it away from me now. So with
you seem like you're worried they might.
Now I'm D+.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got to the end of that, and as I'm going through my undergrad, I'm just taking anything urban, any urban agriculture, urban design, urban law, urban sociology, urban psychology, anything with urban in the title I took. And I got to the end of my undergrad, and I went straight to grad school. I got my Master's of Public Administration. We have an MPA, right?
I do.
So it's a pretty common advanced degree for people in our line of work. But I also stayed there at Iowa State, and I got that too. And while I was in graduate school at Iowa State, I had a great fellowship with the Department of Residence, where I worked in married student housing, because I was married most of the time I was in undergrad and grad school. And I worked in married student housing, and it was like a little city in many ways, right? It's people and kids and public safety and parks and public works and all of that. And so I got that initial exposure while I was a grad student, which was super valuable to me. And then as I was graduating with my MPA in 1988, started looking for a job. And I wanted to be a city manager somewhere. And so I was trying to figure out where to be. I interviewed for a job in Snow Hill, Maryland, which is a tiny little town on the eastern shore of Maryland. Didn't get it.
And real quick to keep in mind, because I went through the same thing, the idea that coming even out of graduate school that you would be able to interview and get a job as a city manager in Eden Prairie or it's not going to happen. No. You're interviewing in cities of 1,000, 2,000 people. Okay, so just kind of setting that stage. So
for sure.
Little city in Maryland, you interview and don't get the job.
It was like 1,500 people or 2,000 people. Don't get that job. Come back to Ames, Iowa. Regroup. I applied for another job in Norris, Tennessee, to be their city manager, and I got it. It was super exciting. So we moved there. We have 2 kids by this point. I'm just getting out of grad school. We moved to Norris, Tennessee, a little town in East Tennessee, sort of in the hills. It was a town that was built from scratch by the Tennessee Valley Authority in the 1930s when they built a big dam there. And so it was unique. The whole town was on the National Historic Register. Because of that, and they'd always had a city manager from day one, and it was a lot of northern transplants that were there, people that were working for the Tennessee Valley Authority, civil engineers and foresters for the most part. And so they thought hiring a young guy from the Midwest would be great, and it was a great experience.
Good. I think also what in this field, you got your master's degree in 1988.
Yep.
I got mine in 94. And in that time, 80s through the 90s, even before that, I think people don't realize that our job, city manager, typically involve people that came out of other disciplines, in city government, the finance discipline, the planning, the community development. So I think we were one of the earlier generations of people that solely went to get a master's degree in public administration and to be city managers. We weren't finance directors, or in the case of even before you came to Eden Prairie, the city engineer became the city manager. In Edina, the planner development director became that. And now you and I, being elder statesmen in our field, that the people now coming up, it's I want to be a city manager. So I just think it's important to say what you wanted to do was kind of unique.
It was, and I didn't have a model to follow. I just thought, hey, if I'm going to do this kind of job, it would be good for me to have experiences in a lot of different things. But you're right, the group of people in our field that are maybe 5 or 10 years older than us in terms of experience all came in. A lot of public works directors, and I find a lot of community development people sort of from the deal-making kind of world seem to gravitate this direction. But one of the big advantages of starting in a very small town is you get to / have to do everything, right? I was the only professional employee that was there. I was the finance director, the HR director, the park and rec director, the public works director, the public safety director. I got experience doing everything.
How many? So in Norris, roughly
20 people.
20 people.
Yeah. They had a nice public safety department and a public works group, and that was about it.
So then you moved on to back to Iowa.
Yeah,
right?
back to Iowa. So I moved to. I got hired to be the first city administrator in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. A few years previous to that, a guy came into the city council chambers in Mount Pleasant and murdered the mayor. I mean, shot him right in the head 3 times, killed the guy right in a council meeting. And he also shot the council members on either side of him. So huge event in the city history and national history in some ways. But so that put the community in a lot of turmoil. Right?
Was he known to the city council?
He was. He was the guy. We all have him in our towns, right? He's disgruntled. He's mad because the city is. He thought the city was filling his basement with stormwater or something, right? And that they weren't taking care of it, and he just had enough, and he snapped and he killed him. Died in prison some years later.
Wow.
But as you can imagine, for a couple of years after that, nobody wants to be the mayor. Nobody wants to be on the park commission. Nobody wants to be involved in civic government because look what happens.
Yeah.
So the town elders tried to figure out what to do, and they went to this young trial lawyer who had moved to town recently because he married a local girl, and they asked him if he would be mayor, and he said that he would, but he also had a law practice and a family to feed, and if he was going to do it, he'd have to have a city administrator sort of do the day-to-day stuff. And so that was me. They hired me to do that.
First person to do this.
First person to do that, which was really crazy because I think I was 27 years old at the time and had 2 years of previous experience. So I was winging it and learning and kind of on the rope while I was doing it. And that mayor was Tom Vilsack, and Tom later went on to be the governor of Iowa for a couple of terms, and then he was the Secretary of Agriculture in the Obama administration for 8 years.
Yeah, very well-known name.
Ended up being a kind of a big shot.
Do you stay in touch?
No, not in particular. But a couple of years ago at National League of Cities, I saw him right before an event and had a chance to catch up a little bit because he was speaking to, I think, the lunch crowd at that point. So it was really good to see him and yeah, I know him, he knows me, but we don't really keep in touch much anymore. But it was a great experience, again, to sort of step up sort of in a rung of city and learn about the things going on there. The city had a water and electric utility in addition to parks and public works and fire and police and planning and building inspections and economic development and all of that. And it was a good run.
What we call a kind of a full service community.
Yeah, full service community.
Independent.
Small college town.
Okay.
Yeah.
What college is there?
Iowa Wesleyan College. I was going to say was there. It was there at the time. I think it's still there now.
Oh, you think it might be defunct?
Yeah, it was teetering.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't very strong.
Well, there's a lot of Wesleyans. There's an Illinois Wesleyan.
Yeah.
There's a couple. I don't know what the Wesleyan.
What
does that mean?
I think it's a Methodist thing.
Okay. Yeah, there's some Wesleyans.
Yeah.
And there's just the Wesleyans.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
We wish them good luck.
I do.
I hope they're still around.
Yeah, I hope they're still around.
All right.
Too. Yeah.
So then you come to the fair state of Minnesota, right?
Yeah. So at the tail end of this time frame, 96, my wife and I are thinking about where do we want to be. We'd always kind of had our sights on the Twin Cities, and I remember working.
Which many people in Iowa do, right?
They do, for sure.
They do. I'm from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We begrudgingly come here, but Iowa people want to get
yearn.
here. They want
to come here.
Come
right.
north.
Yeah. At least in the part of the state I grew up in, Northeast Iowa. In other parts of Southeast Iowa, they kind of gravitate towards St. Louis, and Southwest Iowa, they gravitate towards Kansas City. I don't know where people in Northwest Iowa gravitate to. Maybe Sioux Falls. Maybe
Chicago.
Yeah. But in my part of the state, there's a lot of gravitating towards Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a cool place. It's a real city. Des Moines' not really a real city, But anyway, it was a great place to kind of aspire to, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's a hard place to break into. I don't know if you found that from Wisconsin.
I did.
But when I would apply for jobs kind of in and around the metro area from Iowa, notable executive search people, some of whom would say, you don't have a chance. You're not from here. They'd say that to me. You're not from here.
Yep.
Like, just throw me in the pot. Let me see if I can get a job here. So that's kind of what happened in Northfield. And I was still a kind of a young professional in this field. They had a long-time administrator who was the city engineer before he was their public works director. And he had worked out a deal. Council at the time wanted to fire him, but he worked a deal with them where he could retire stay 2 more years, be public works director, and they could hire a new administrator. And so they hired me.
Okay.
So that was a weird situation too, where
he's still there.
He's still there. He's still there for 2 years, not 2 weeks.
Wow.
He's still there for 2 years. Worked out great. He was a great public works director. He was happier. He didn't have all the political nonsense that he had to deal with as city administrator, particularly in Northfield. But yeah, it was a great run. A lot of people didn't want to be interested in that job because they thought, he was going to be a snot about it, but he was not. He was good.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you hear, about different cities. Do you think that Mount Pleasant having university helped you with Northfield that had a university?
I sold it like that for sure. When I was,
Yeah.
I said, hey, I'm a city administrator in a small town with a small college, and I could be your city administrator too. I know how to do the town gown thing, and to a certain degree, that was true. The town gown issues with Carleton and St. Olaf in Northfield are significant, and they're very important to the local economy there for sure.
So a big part of your job there was those relationships with the university.
I would say it was an important part of the job for sure. They add so much to the community. Northfield wouldn't be the same without those 2 colleges there. But they do have a set of difficulties that come with them too.
Mm-hmm.
Protecting students, dealing with student housing issues, just large kind of non-tax-paying entities in a community bring along some issues with them.
Would the makeup of the city council ever be reflective of the universities, or was it more just?
Yeah, in Northfield, it's a ward and it's a ward and at large kind of system there. So it's a home rule city. For us, that means they can kind of make up their own rules for the most part. And there's almost always somebody that dislikes the colleges, and almost always somebody that loves the colleges on the city council, and maybe sometimes 1 or 2 of those kinds of people. So yeah, it's always an issue on the council.
So what sticks out for you with your time in Northfield? So this is kind of the late 90s into the early 2000s. What were some things that you remember?
Well, one of the couple big things were that was a time, late 90s, where there was the community was trying to decide whether it wanted to be a standalone sort of rural, bucolic little town, or did it want to be a kind of a growth ex-urban city, right? So you're right on the fringe of the metro area. There's a little bit of the town that's in Dakota County, for example, and there was a lot of development interest in the town at that point. Gas prices were still okay for a good share of the 90s, and people were driving from Northfield there or from the cities down there for work. So it was that resolving that sort of identity for the community was an important issue, a lot of debate. And in Northfield, the community is just wired to have a lot of community engagement and debate and soul searching, and it's a hard place to get to consensus. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
One of the bigger issues that I had to deal with there was the development of a Target store, right? So Target came to town, and
big corporate Target,
and they bought a piece of land kind of on the edge of town, and so we had that very predictable discussion about Target's going to kill our downtown, and that was a difficult one. They finally the city council rejected Target's request for some rezoning thing or something. But Edina Northfield had in its charter you could petition the council for ordinance change, right? So and referendum. So referendum, recall, and initiative. That's what the titles are. So residents drafted an ordinance through the initiative process, got all the petitions signed, and submitted it to the council. And the initiative was an ordinance that was like a planned community zoning district or something like that. But it was a zoning ordinance written by residents that would allow the Target store to be built at the location they wanted to build it.
Wow.
So they submit that to the city. The city has no choice but to put it out for referendum. And it passed like 50.1 to 49.9.
Wow.
And so the council then is obliged to adopt that ordinance. It allowed Target to come in, and Target is there today. And it didn't destroy the downtown, but it changed the downtown into a downtown that's more heavy restaurant, bar, hospitality, gifts.
Yeah, I think you see that. I mean, I was in Hopkins, and obviously metro downtowns might be a little bit different, but I think that's a changing nature of downtown. I think you probably think back to Mount Pleasant or Norris, and I think when I was in Hector, it's if there was talk of a Target or even a McDonald's or a Dairy Queen, this is awesome. Yeah. We want that. Yeah. This is great.
That's exactly
Please
right.
come here. Please be here.
Yeah.
Please locate here. Yeah. But it's a little different depending on the community.
Yeah, and this is a community that was torn. For people that wanted the Target store there, those are people that were already driving to Apple Valley every week to shop at Target, and they looked at this as, wow, this could save me a lot of time and trouble and so forth. But those are the ones that they prevailed, and the town is still a nice place today.
Oh, sure.
I would think the other thing that was big.
And you lived. I mean, you lived.
I lived there.
You lived there. Your kids went to school there.
I moved there in '96 when I moved up for the job, and it was a great place to raise kids. I have 3 boys. Toby, who's how old is he now? 34. Turner is 32, and Ethan is 29. They all went through and graduated from Northfield schools there. It was a great place to raise kids. Tough place to work, just because of the community consensus struggles, I think. Yeah.
So in terms of like working, how many city council members in Northfield?
7.
And there were wards.
Yep.
Yeah.
So okay. 4 wards, 2 at large, and a mayor.
Okay.
Yeah. And mayor was elected.
And just a lot of debate, discussion, consensus.
Long council meetings. Holy crap, man, they were long.
Yeah.
And when I first got the job in Eden Prairie in 2002, our council meetings were on the same night, right? So first and third Tuesdays,
Right.
Same in
Still
Northfield.
is. Yeah.
So I was commuting. I commuted to Eden Prairie most of the time from Northfield that I worked here. I remember how fun it was, and I would drive by City Hall on my way back home. So I would drive up to Eden Prairie. I'd have my council meeting on a Tuesday night. We'd wrap it up. I'd drive all the way back to Northfield, drive by City Hall, and they were still going at it. And I remember thinking, this is good, man. I made the right choice here.
And then, we'll jump ahead to Edina, but then when you go to Edina and I'm in Eden Prairie, I think I would drive home from the Eden Prairie Council meeting. I think I would maybe text you and say, are you still in your meeting?
Yeah, I know. So I took a backward step in that regard, but,
Well, it's different. So
It's
that
different.
So then you said 2002.
Yeah.
Then you come to Eden Prairie. You come here.
Yep. So at
how does that come about, and why? Why?
Okay, so that comes about where I got a new mayor in Northfield, and I felt like he, so in our business, I think you got to have a pretty good emotional intelligence, right? And I felt like this guy really would prefer that I go work somewhere else
Without saying
it.
it.
He wasn't going to fire me.
Yeah.
He was just going to make me miserable until I, and not by being mean, but by being, just slowing things down and going in a different direction than the council and forcing me to confront him with things. So it just I had enough emotional intelligence to think, I kind of see where this is going, and, have at it. He was elected by the people. Nobody elected me for anything.
Sure.
So if he wants the community to go in a different direction, it's his prerogative, and I should honor that. So I started thinking about looking for another job, and I got a call one day from Harry Brule.
Yeah.
And Harry is an executive search guy in the Twin Cities. I also knew him when I was in Northfield because he was an adjunct professor at St. Olaf as industrial psychology or something. But he would have a group of students. He would always call me up and say, hey, I got 5 students that want to study this. Can you accommodate them? And I accommodated them all the time. So that's how I knew Harry. And he said, I got this job that I got hired to do in Eden Prairie. I wonder if you'd be interested in it. And so he shared it with me, and it was a job I thought, I'm not ready for that job. Man, this seems like this is something that's a step or two yet for me. But he said, no, I think they're at a stage where they're ready to hire somebody like you. So you should throw your hat in the ring. So I threw my hat in the ring and went through the interview process, and voila, I got the job, and I started in, I think, April of 2002.
And this is probably a good segue into thinking about what's interesting about our career is that we have multiple bosses.
Yeah.
And that they change on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And, you have obviously a really good attitude about, hey, we weren't elected. We're the appointed people. We're responsible for the oversight of the operations and the hiring of the people that work here, but it's a city council that was elected, and it's their choice. And it's just interesting that he always explained to people that, hey, one of my bosses, 2 of my bosses could change in November, and I may have not even I may have met them, but I don't know them that well. So it's kind of an interesting world.
Yeah. And people may select your bosses based on a set of criteria that you don't have anything to do with or understand or anything else. And so it's always interesting meeting new council members and understanding what it is they want to accomplish. And I think about how can I help them accomplish that if it ends up being the consensus of the council.
Right.
So one council member, I work with them and have worked with them for a number of years to get them to understand how consensus is important. And that's not always easy.
No, I mean, good city councils understand that's consensus, and they know that there are going to be some votes that are 3-2 and 4-3, and they know that the manager's job is to follow the consensus and carry out the consensus, but at the same time, we work for all of them.
Yeah, as a group.
Absolutely.
Right. And when I was hired here, the council was Nancy Tierra-Lukens was the mayor, great mayor. Ron Case, Sherry Butcher, Jan Mossman, and a guy named Dave Luce were on the council at that time. That's the council that hired me. And that group of people had a long run in city government. I mean, they really have their fingerprints on major changes and a certain direction for this community. They made a difference.
They were a seasoned group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking back at your time here, what were some of the highlights for you, some of the recollections?
One recollection I have that is interesting is I think tells a story too, is I think the first week I was here, I was involved in a meeting with Hennepin County where we talked about this Southwest Light Rail Transit project and where it was going to go and how long it was going to take and what the planning efforts were going to be, and at that stage in 2002, the plan was just to take it right down the trail, right?
Yep.
This is Southwest Light Rail Trail.
Yep.
It says right what it's going to be. The county bought it for that purpose. But that ran into a serious buzzsaw in a lot
of neighborhoods.
Yeah, in a lot of neighborhoods. So they came out and really were vigorously opposed to it. And so we were successful, actually, in sort of harnessing that and getting the county to change the direction so that it takes the direction that it's currently planned to. But, it takes that long, right? So I think about, wow, that was 2002, and that wasn't day one for that project either. It had a couple of years before that for sure. But it's a good example of how long it takes to achieve a massive public works project like that.
Yeah, and serving probably an area that makes more sense with the job centers and the commercial center, not diagonally through the heart of the city.
And it was a learning experience for me. I think in our business, you can often fall into a line of thinking where the NIMBYs are always wrong, right? They're mostly wrong, but not always. And this was a case where they weren't wrong.
They weren't wrong.
They didn't want this thing in their backyard, but it should have been moved to a location where it served the industrial and retail and commercial needs of the city better. And we followed their lead, and voila, right? Here you are.
Well, and I was just thinking, too, in terms of your time in public works projects, 212.
Yeah.
212 was a big deal.
212 was built. We built Fire Station 4 out there.
Del Road 212.
Del Road. The airport project was kind of getting going at that point. We had a lot of airport negotiations when I was here. We did the community center project. I think you guys have added to it since I left, but that was a major project for the city too, and another good learning experience where we went to the people with a big referendum request for $20 million or something like that for a pool, a big aquatic center, and then some other stuff too. But that was sort of the highlight of it. And that referendum got killed pretty seriously by the voters. So right after that, we went out with Peter Leatherman, Bill Morris. We had them come back and do a survey of people who voted about why didn't you vote for this? And they all said, not all said, but a huge majority said, I liked certain aspects of the package, but I didn't like the pool. And if I could have just voted for, trails and buying some land and baseball stadium or whatever, I would have voted for it. So we heard that, and we went back and we structured a kind of what I would call an a la carte referendum where we allowed them to do that. Pool was $20 million, but there was, 2 for this and 1 for that. And, there were like 4 or 5 other things. And, that's what happened, right? They killed the pool again. But they voted for all of those other items, just like the study said they told
separated into the areas that people support.
So when they had a chance to vote on an a la carte ballot, they did exactly what they told the pollster they said they were going to do. So that was pretty exciting at the time.
Yeah, and I think about Eden Prairie at the time that you were here was still relatively robust in growth.
Yeah.
And it was a growth period. I mean, 90s were a huge growth period. I think
yeah.
the 2000s were still a growth period. You came from college town, established college town, 7 council members in wards, to kind of a fast-growing, large suburb with 5 council members at large who, as you said, were pretty seasoned in what they did, and a lot of staff people. So that
it was such a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And it was, so the scale of everything here was so different. In Northfield, we might have 20, a 20-lot subdivision. And when I came here, we might have 4 50-lot subdivisions being plotted right at the same time. And we're working with national developers, and we're taking a lot of money in. And it was just, the scale of things here was so much bigger than what I had in Northfield. But I had a good team to work with here when I came into it. Gene Dietz and Bob Lambert and Jim Clark and people like that had a lot of experience, and people that still work here now.
Yeah, many do. But some
great.
of them have retired. But the time that you came, the directors that you're mentioning had 20-plus years experience.
Yeah, and they knew what they were doing, and they were peers. They were peers with the developers that they were dealing with, and that was such an important benefit for the city.
And I think as well, and I've heard you talk about this too, even in the last 3-4 years of your tenure, that the city was starting to get national recognition as a premier city too.
Yeah.
And it's continued.
Yeah.
I mean, we've continued. I think when the Money magazine did the #1, I think in 2009 or 10.
2010.
Yeah. Since I've been here, we've since been 2 and 3 and other numbers. And I think, actually, to be honest with you, I think Money has kind of stopped doing.
Is that right?
They have different rules,
Okay.
and it's every 3rd year, and it's only one city, so it's kind of, that's all screwy now.
Okay.
But there's still other accolades that come in. But either way, that was a big deal.
That was a huge deal, and it was one where I remember they told us that we were going to be in the top 10, but they wouldn't tell us where. And they wouldn't tell us what rank. They said, you're in the top 10, but and you're going to be announced on the Today Show.
Right.
So we got like the East Coast feed of the Today Show in this building. I don't know how that happened, but we did. And I'm waiting so I could see number 10, number 9, number 8, number 7, number 6, number 5. And they get all the way up and they get number 2. And I was ready, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's left? and they said number 2. I don't know who it was. And I thought to myself, what? They forgot us, because it didn't occur to me even at that moment that we were going to be number 1. And then, of course, that's what happened. And it was a huge surprise, and a huge honor. But it really started some kind of cascading sorts of things to happen here about how we were gonna. What were we going to say? How we were going to use it in our branding? How do we talk about it internally, externally? Got a lot of media requests after that, so it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I remember that being in Hopkins. My quick Money magazine story is when we, the next time around, fell to number 2. The #1 city was Carmel, Indiana. Carmel. Yeah. Suburb of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So I'm there for I think it was the Final Four. Basketball Final Four was in Indianapolis like a year later. We've got those #1 magnets and stickers and everything that we have here in Eden Prairie. So I took them to Indianapolis, and we drove to my family. We just went through Carmel. We stayed like in a hotel nearby Carmel, and I went to the City Hall parking lot and put the Eden Prairie #1 magnets on some cars in the car. But, I mean, congrats to them. Our mayor called their mayor.
Yeah.
And she congratulated them on being #1, but I left something behind.
Awesome.
In Carmel. But either way, anything else in Eden Prairie that before we move on to
the other thing, we did major park improvements here that were great. We did the Cummins Grill House, and we did the Smith Douglas Moore House, kind of historic projects. Those were big deals at the time. Yeah, and I think it was. And we did some pretty significant kind of internal restructuring of how we provide services here. But yeah, those are sort of the big external things.
Yeah, and now you have been in Edina as a city manager, this is your longest stay.
Yeah.
This is probably it's been almost 9 years in the Emerald City.
It'll be 9 this fall.
9 in the Emerald City. So what's it like being the Edina city manager?
One thing that was a surprise to me is when I went there in 2010 from an environment here that was kind of coming out of the recession at that time. I thought that Edina would be slow, but it was not. There was as much it's a different scale of development that's happening there. It's not now, but there was it in 2010. There was a lot of things happening there. It was just as busy, if not busier, than I was here. And I wasn't anticipating that. I thought things would be a little slower. The town's a little smaller.
Fully developed, old classic city, but
so what could go wrong, right? So, but what was going on at the time was a lot of the residential redevelopment phenomenon was starting to happen there, scaling up in a big way, and that is incredibly disruptive in the community when people are
McMansions.
We don't call it that.
Right. I'm just for the listeners. I'm just
all right.
helping.
For the listeners, we prefer to say residential redevelopment.
All right,
that's how we call it.
Got it.
Yeah. So don't call it that anymore.
Okay.
But they were, there's 100 of these happening every year, and it's a house that goes from 1,500 square feet to 3,500 square feet, from $350,000 to $1.1 million. It's a huge impact on the neighborhood, because you might have a neighbor that gets their house torn down, and then one across the street, and then your other neighbor, and so there's all the hassle of that disruption. It's great for the tax base, but while it's great for the tax base, it's hard on the individual neighbors around it. So it's so that was something we had to learn I had to deal with, because I just hadn't had much of that here.
And people still ask if that's coming here, and it really hasn't yet. But I think the other parts of redevelopment are happening here as they have in Edina. And people talk about as well all the development in the Southdale area, France and Xerxes, between the Crosstown and 494. There's just a ton happening. There's happening at Ridgedale. And we're going to start seeing it here at the Eden Prairie Center, but in the transit-oriented development as well. But there's been a lot of vertical and infill.
$2 billion worth of development there, and including, I think since 2014, like 2,500 apartment units in the Southdale district.
Yeah.
So, it's all tearing something down and building something in its place, or building something in a parking lot that wasn't used. So land there is a valuable commodity, and so people are figuring out how to exploit it better. So if they're buying something to tear it down, it's 100% certainty that what replaces it is higher density, probably much higher density, and higher tax value too.
Well, and I just read too, and I think this makes sense, that the library is going to be in Southdale, and then that property would be redeveloped.
Yeah, and so that's 8. The current Southdale Regional Library site on York Avenue is 8 acres, and it's in the Edina School District, which is weird. Most of the Southdale, people don't know this, but most of the Southdale district, all the way down to Centennial Lakes, is actually in the Richfield School District. Okay. So Richfield gets to tax that, but there's this little finger that sticks through it that gets the Galleria and I think maybe Target and the new Lunds and Byerly store. But that's in the Edina School District, and it goes all the way over to the Southdale Library. So when that redevelops, that's an important factor, because in our town, land that's in the Edina School District has a different market value altogether than land that's in the Hopkins School District or the Richfield School District.
Okay.
For better or worse, that's just the way it is.
The way it is. Mm-hmm. What do you like Edina 10 years from now? What does it look like? What are some things you see?
What do I see? I see taller buildings, probably office and residential, kind of continuing up and down France Avenue. That's an important address in the Twin Cities, and people want it. So if I could figure out how to make another France Avenue somewhere, it'd be a good idea.
Replicate that.
Bigger, probably bigger and more healthcare investments in the community in terms of jobs and that sort of thing. I would say in 10 years, we might be at the point where Simon, who owns Southdale Center, is making some major decisions about the future of the mall. I'm not sure what the future of a big regional shopping center is in the days of Amazon Prime, right?
Right.
I think a place like the Galleria is well situated.
Mm-hmm.
People that want to spend that much money on whatever or want to see it, touch it, feel it before they do it.
Like your wife and kids.
Yeah, like your wife and kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. I'd say increasing density there, but still most of those kind of single-family neighborhoods, which are really the key to Edina, staying mostly the same.
Right, and I get that too here about, with redevelopment and just a city growing, there isn't a plan in Minnetonka, Edina, Eden Prairie to take out neighborhoods. No, it's protection of what's there. Now you again have to deal with the residential redevelopment, not McMansions,
nice job
in that area. So, a couple more minutes, Scott, to talk about maybe you personally and the profession. So, being a city manager, what do you think in general is most rewarding for you?
Most rewarding, and for me, and maybe the reason why I was attracted to this job is that you get to make a difference in your community or in people's lives on a direct basis. You get to help build a swimming pool. You get to improve a street. You get to start a new program that benefits people in the community. It's there. You can see it. You can touch it. It's very tangible. It's much different than at the state level or at the federal level in terms of your individual ability to impact change and be a part of something positive. So that's what I like about my job.
And that's what you saw as a freshman in college.
Yeah.
And that's great that it's still what you can do.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I'm still doing what I wanted to do as a 19-year-old. So maybe I'm stuck in some psychological stage or something. But anyway, it's been a good career.
Yeah. What is probably the toughest, most difficult, challenging? I wouldn't say depressing, but what's
It's there's a few things, but I would probably point to the part where we got to fire somebody, you got to terminate somebody, particularly, and maybe you would agree, in a small town. In a place like Edina and Eden Prairie, there's other people around that can help with that.
Yeah.
And it's not all that common where it's more common, I'd say, for people to live elsewhere and work here. But when you're in a small rural town, the people that work in the town probably live in the town or just outside, or their parents do, or their siblings, and they go to church with you and all those sorts of things. It's hard. Boy, it's hard to fire somebody when you're a small town city administrator.
Very
stressful.
I have been there. It is very stressful, and you can be seen as the outsider, and you're trying to just hold people accountable and deliver a high level of services. And
it's always for a good reason, I think. But it's just the act of doing it. It's hard.
Yep, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So for you, what would be like the perfect day for you? And maybe more like not at Edina City Hall.
Not at Edina City Hall. Well, let's see.
Is it? I thought you were going to kind of jump to it. Be like it's the St. Patrick's Day parade. And you're heading down to the St. Patrick's Day parade.
That's a pretty good day, man.
That's a good day.
It's a real good day. That's a good day. It's a big day in my family. We march every year in St. Paul in the parade with the Neals and O'Neills, and it's a great day. It's always a nice day out too. It's always nice and warm and in the middle of March. I don't know how that always works, but it always does. It probably has to do, it's that, and it's being with my family. I said before, I've got 3 sons. 2 of them live abroad. My oldest son and his wife live in Vienna, Austria, and that's where my granddaughter is, 3 years old, Rosalie. And then my middle son and his wife live in Shanghai, China. And my youngest son lives in South Minneapolis. He and his wife do, so they're pretty close to us. So I'd say doing
two
something.
of them on different continents and one in the neighborhood.
Yeah, one in the neighborhood, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we get together as a family every other Christmas. I got them all and we'll do a Christmas trip somewhere, usually somewhere warm. Last year it was Greece and Crete for a week and a half. So those kind of days are really precious to me because I don't get to see them for extended periods of time as a group.
Good. No, that's nice to hear. So what would be a passion of yours or an interest of yours that maybe not a lot of people know about?
One that maybe not a lot of people know about, but some people do, is I come from a soccer family, and my boys were all soccer players. We all follow the Arsenal, a London-based team, together. They had a terrible game yesterday and lost Europa League championship, so we're all very embarrassed. We have season tickets to Minnesota United, and we've had season tickets for them for a long time, actually. So it's exciting to have our own new stadium. And
so you would go to Blaine?
Yeah, we went to Blaine. Jeez, Blaine. Yeah,
I never went to Blaine. I went to when they were in the U.S. Bank. TCF. I always mix the two up.
Yeah.
But what about the new field?
Oh, it's fantastic. We have seats on pretty close to midfield. Great place to watch the game. Yeah, I love going there.
And where are you part of the fan supporter groups or whatever?
That's for kids, man.
Okay.
Yeah, we have good tickets.
Just
sit
tickets
in a seat,
like in the middle of the field.
The supporters groups are at the end, and those are for they have just a different relationship with the team than I do.
Dark Clouds,
True North Elite, the Red Loons,
they have a
Dark Glitterati. There's probably 6 or 7 of them, different ones. Yeah,
they have a different relationship with the team than you do.
I buy a seat and sit in it,
yeah.
Right? And
they
stand the whole time and they sing and so forth. I'm going to do that, however, later in June, the U.S. national team plays a Gold Cup game at the stadium in June. And I'm going to go to that. My sons and I travel to U.S. national team games.
Okay.
In the country, we've been in New York and San Francisco and Dallas and Chicago and Denver and all kinds. It's kind of family road trip with them. And that U.S. national team plays here in June. Looking forward to the game, and I'm going to be in the supporter section for that.
Okay. And then have you seen Arsenal? Have you traveled to see them?
I've never been to the stadium, although I saw them in a summer preseason game in Austria. The year my son got married in 2010, my oldest son, the wedding was in Austria, so we all go over there for a couple of weeks. And Arsenal played an early kind of preseason game in this little town. It was fantastic. We had access to them we would have never had in a big stadium. But I've seen games in Amsterdam and Barcelona and Rome, Stuttgart, and I think that's all, actually.
And the United experience, especially in the new stadium, sounds very, very festive.
Yeah.
But is it kind of hard to beat being in Europe? I mean, they go nuts, don't they?
Yeah. We've talked a little bit earlier in the podcast about scale, and I would say in this case, the scale of the European experience is pretty incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to replicate that here.
Yeah, I hope to get to the new stadium here sometime this year. Couple more questions. If you're stuck on a desert island, you get to bring 3 things with you. What do you bring?
All right, so I know how to answer this question because I watch Naked and Afraid. You ever watch Naked and Afraid?
I have. I've seen part of Naked and Afraid.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And actually, when we had the building official on for a podcast, we thought he lived a little bit of Naked and Afraid. He had a little experience like that, so we talked about that. But either way, go ahead. You know what to do.
A knife.
For
one, in case you got to kill something.
Okay.
It's important to have a knife. Matches.
Okay.
In case you got to start a fire. And a pot that you can use for cooking water, disinfecting water, those sorts. So those 3 things: knife, matches, pot to cook water.
So you're practical. You're practical. It's not
Very
my
practical.
favorite record,
geez,
my
no.
favorite book,
No.
a bottle of wine. It's
A
knife.
For
I've
sure.
got to eat. You get to make one rule that everybody has to follow. What is that rule?
They should do what I tell them to do. That would be a good rule.
That'd be a great rule,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
yeah.
If
yeah.
that would simplify
And not
things
just at work either. At home too.
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Everywhere you go.
Yep.
Life would be so much simpler
It
if
would.
people followed the rule that everyone should do what Scott and Neal tells them to
Telling
do.
you, man, they probably enjoy life a little bit more too.
They don't know what
They
they're
don't know.
missing.
They don't know what they
don't
don't
know what they're missing.
I know.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, that's
Good luck with
that's
that.
not going anywhere. But this is a hypothetical, right?
It's absolutely hypothetical. It seems like it's a little more than that for you.
Like I've been thinking about
right,
that.
you've been thinking about it. But thank you for coming back to Eden Prairie. It's nice to have you here and to share a little bit about your career and your journey.
Thanks
Scott.
for the invitation.
Yeah, I
Rick. This has
appreciate
been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.